Hello, long time no see on this channel, and for that I do apologize. I am giving up basically giving any sort of expectation on how frequent or infrequently I am going to be posting on here. Unfortunately, that is just the nature of what I've been dealing with and just planning and budgeting out the time that I can spend on this. And I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I had just felt a little bit tired of doing these kinds of videos for a little bit. So I'm hoping that next year I'll be picking it up a bit, picking up the pace a bit and doing more album reviews, but also maybe other kinds of music discussion topics and song ranking videos and other types of things that that might not even be music related, but I might still try and branch out a little bit. But don't worry, there are several core artists that I know, regardless of what happens or where I choose to drift in terms of the content on this channel, that there are always going to be artists that if they release new projects, I'm going to talk about it. And Lana Del Rey is one of those artists. And so I wasn't planning on filming a video today, but I decided to make time to cover this new song that she just dropped called Let Me Love You Like a Woman, which is the official first single off of her upcoming album, Chemtrails Over the Country Club. An album that I think I've heard is rumored to come out sometime in January. I would imagine early 2021. I would be surprised if it took much longer than that. She had teased the album was going to come out back in September, and I was not surprised in the slightest that that date came and went, because she announced that not long after Norman F. and Rockwell came out, and I thought that was way too soon. I felt like NFR needed space to breathe a little bit, that to push out another album, and especially to just right off the heels of releasing one, automatically be talking about the next one. It just felt like she was pumping, it felt like she needed to pump the brakes just a smidge. So I'm actually really glad that we're taking a little bit of time here. I'm okay with waiting for Chemtrails because Lana has definitely been consistent with her album releases over the last decade almost now, and she's not an artist that I feel like I'm particularly starving for. But I'm very excited to hear. I've heard, in some interviews, she's given some insight into this new record. She talks about it being just like her most, I mean, she always says this, but like her most personal, her most raw. And she always says that. And after NFR, it's sort of like, well, how much, I mean, I can see her expounding upon the territory she went on that record, but it's sort of like, I mean, I don't want to say NFR was the pinnacle because that kind of concerns me a little bit. I mean, it got Grammy nominations, it got so many great reviews and accolades that I don't know if she's necessarily going to ever be able to match the success. I feel like every other album, someone's always had something negative to say. So I'd be interested to see if Chemtrails lives up to the critical acclaim, especially in the alternative community, that NFR garnered, which in the past she had always been sort of slept on as sort of just like this schmaltzy, try hard. So this new song is very simplistic, and it sounds very familiar in a way that doesn't make it feel like it's copying a melody she's done, but it's the kind of song that is so quintessentially Lana at this point that I'm having a hard time feeling like this song as its own package is anything really that groundbreaking. But I don't necessarily think that's what she was going for. I think she wanted to set the pace for this record by making things very, very down to earth, very in that lackadaisical, ultra soft, soothing vocal that she is so known for these days, and just letting us kind of just be lulled to sleep in her arms as she sings, "Let me love you like a woman, let me hold you like a baby." This song is basically, as people have said, an ode to starting anew. She's talking about how she came from a small town. So that's why she is like wanting to move away from Los Angeles. 80 miles north or 80 miles south will do. But could you please come with me? Because I wouldn't have as much fun without you. And simplistically, the narrative and the lyrics of this song don't really go much beyond that. But that's all because of the fact that this song is sort of just meant to be a encapsulated vibe of calm, of, a feeling of contentment. There's an element of plea, but it really is understated because of the fact that she just sounds so confident and comfortable in her sort of smooth, jazzy, way of delivery. And I think that that's something that we're only going to see more of from her as she just gets more unapologetically herself. I saw one person say this is not going to be a Lana Del Rey album, this is going to be an Elizabeth Grant album. And her music, as much as it's evolved and changed over the last decade, from those early songs she put out as Lizzie Grant, there's not really been that much of a distinctive sonic change. You know, this style is something she started with, and it's something she's going to end with. I mean, it's still unique, and there's a story and this movement, and I do think that she is treading in different territories, but in a way that you don't really notice it at first, and it takes a lot of time to sort of soak in and realize that like there's nuances to these songs that at first listen might sound very similar to things she's done before. Is this the most groundbreaking sonically? No. I think this song melodically is not really going much of anywhere, but that was never really the point of it. And it's also not necessarily her most poetic song, because the lyrics don't necessarily have the same level of magnitude as other songs she has written. But again, this is definitely more of an appetite teaser track. I know it's a song that's very personal to her, and so I'm just really, again, just excited to hear what this album will sound like. I've heard it's going to be a bit more country, and it's going to be a bit more of an ode to sort of like the Midwest or the heartland of America. These are things that she has said. So it's definitely going to have an Americana bent, which is something that her music has always had. But this definitely is going to be more focused on that. I guess, you know, NFR still was very California, and I think it'd be kind of nice to see her, you know, the beachy California beach thing is fun, but she's done that for so many albums. I kind of would like to see her get a little bit, you know, regionally in a different direction. Um, with all that being said, I did want to spend a little bit of time, since Lana did drop a new song, addressing some of the controversy that Lana has, particularly in the last several months, gotten herself into. And I had actually intended on filming a separate video about this, but you know, like all the other ideas I had, I just decided to put it on a back burner for the last several months. But this gives me a good opportunity to talk about, firstly, when Chemtrails was announced back in like an interview for some magazine in like June or July, I can't remember when. Lana got into some trouble for some comments she made about women in the pop scene, in pop music and on the radio. She name dropped a lot of, well, basically, she was basically alluding to the fact that she doesn't feel like there's much of a space for women to be soft and feminine in pop music these days, that the landscape is favoring the more aggressive, sexually explicit types of artists. And, you know, she kind of has a point there. But where she really put her foot in her mouth was name dropping a lot of artists in a seemingly kind of disparate attempt to paint a picture of her against the industry. And a lot of the artists she name dropped were women of color, who are in different genres than she was. And it brought up a lot of conversations around, you know, sexism and race, racism against Black women. Lana seemed to kind of just double down when she was, you know, told and pointed out that that might have come across as a little bit like, keep those women's names out of your mouth. You don't need to mention Cardi B. You don't need to mention Kehlani. But she seemed to just kind of double down, and it was so long ago that the story, I don't even remember what she said after that. But it was just this whole thing. And look, the, you know, civil unrest that has been going on, specifically around race in this country, has been absolutely the epicenter of a lot of discussions right now. So I feel as though the cultural conversations that Lana might have in the past been able to get away with are not quite so lenient. And Lana may have done and said dubious things in the past. We always kind of, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I actually thought Lana was a Republican for many years until Trump won the election, and when she came out so openly against him, I was like, oh, maybe she was a Democrat all along. I always kind of assumed she came from some wealthy Republican family. And so I always assumed maybe she wasn't like alt right, but I just didn't assume that she was going to speak out against Trump that way. At best, I thought she was just going to keep silent about it because, that's how a lot of moderate Republicans like to play that game when they're not exactly down with Trump, but they don't want to express dissatisfaction openly. And so they just choose to stay out of politics altogether, which is a very privileged position for lots of white people to be in these days. But that being said, she seemed to be very left, and then she talks about being much more of a moderate, which makes a lot more sense. Which is, all well and good. I never really expected anything different. She had dated a cop for a long time, and a lot of people uh, had things to say about that, which understandably, I mean, in this culture and climate, I think that could be a little viewed as a little questionable, especially a white cop dating someone and, not having those conversations would be difficult unless you don't care that much. I hate to say it. But I don't think she's with him anymore. I got to be honest with you. I'm a little out of the loop with the Lana T. But more recently, there was something that, I mean, I don't want to say was more shocking because, I was very upset by Lana's comments, and especially the fact that she seemed to double down in that response to the response she got from that article. I felt like she just kind of appeared very tone deaf, like she didn't want to listen. She didn't want to acknowledge that, she made some points. She made points about the industry. I think that, if you want to talk about the industry favoring aggressive, sexually explicit artists, then we need to talk about being able to uplift women of color in genres and artists and giving space to women of color to be artists that are anything else. We don't get a lot of Black Taylor Swifts. We don't get a lot of Black Lana Del Reys who make it into the mainstream pulp culture and where the money is flowing and which executives are like lifting up which artists. And a lot of the time, it's still white men who are in charge who are thinking, oh, this is something we can capitalize off of. We can capitalize off of Black women's bodies. So let's push women to go in that direction, Black women to go in that direction. And but yeah, women, Lana is right. There needs to be more of a space for soft, demure voices who are a little bit more restrained and not quite so sexually overt. Um, in mainstream music, I would agree, but you don't need to bring Black women's names into that conversation because you're crossing over into a conversation that you are excluded from, that you benefit from in a lot of ways. You are very lucky that because of your whiteness, you are able to not be labeled as a white soft female artist because of the color of your skin. It's not a big deal. You don't have to carry that burden with you. All of these things just didn't seem to kind of, I don't know, it sort of set her off a little bit, which was a little bit sad to see. But more recently, she released her new poetry book, Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass, which I know some people are going to come for me. I have actually still not listened to that audio book. Apparently, it has some Jack Antonoff produced music attached to it. So this has definitely got me thinking. You know what? I need to get around to listening to this because I do love spoken poetry, and especially Lana's type of poetry. I think this is. I've read some of the poems. She's shared some of them. So I do need to get around to that. But basically, she was at a book signing and she was wearing a mask, but it was a mesh mask. So, meaning there was basically just like, holes everywhere. It was not actually doing anything to prevent the spread of the coronavirus, which is what the point of wearing a mask is. Climate in public. And the mesh mask thing is something we've seen a lot of sort of Trump supporting white women, dubbed Karens, so to speak, promoting as sort of like this weird loophole they seem to have found against the elite mainstream media who's telling us and forcing us to wear these masks. It's much more breathable. It's so much nicer to wear. You don't even know you're wearing it. I'm like, well, that's because it basically serves no purpose. So you're completely defeating the point, and you are endangering other people. By choosing to, so recklessly not wear something that actually prevents, oral spread. And so that was a very upsetting thing to see. I was not expecting that at all from her. I know that there's a indoor book signing, and it was close quarters. Everyone was wearing masks, and if I had shown up at that book signing and I had seen Lana wearing a mesh mask that was so obviously a mesh mask, um, seeing my one of my like favorite artists like that, it would have been very upsetting. I can't imagine. I don't know what some of the people at that book signing must have thought when they run into her like that. But it was just, what are you thinking, Lana? What are you thinking? And so I got to be honest with you, it really did cast a bit of a shadow for me a bit over, like, oh gosh, some of these, I mean, people are imperfect, and there's artists who have disappointed me before, and there's still things about them that, the thing for me with Lana's music is that her music is just so good, in my opinion, that like I have a really hard time disqualifying it because of some of her behavior. Um, in the same way that like J.K. Rowling has come under fire, understandably, for very upsetting, problematic things that she has been saying, very harmful things to the trans community in the last several months. That doesn't mean that I think that the Harry Potter books should be burned. I still view those books as like the pinnacle of childhood fantasy, at least modern childhood fantasy. And I owe so much to those books. And I mean, I can't, it's almost like J.K. Rowling released her rights to the ownership of them after a certain amount of time, and they become their own thing. And I don't even really think of her attached to them anymore. It's sad, but it's just the way that you have to view art as separate from the artist, when the artist can sometimes prove to be problematic and someone you might not want to support. And it's really sad when that happens, but I don't want to there's so many sad things going on in the world. I don't want to let certain things like the Harry Potter books or Lana Del Rey's music, I don't want to let those things be, ruined for me forever. Um, it's a bit of a privileged take, I understand, but I think Lana, I don't know if she is going to learn from these experiences. I mean, I don't know if I have no idea. I'd be interested to hear in interviews what she has to say, because I'm sure it'll be brought up as she's doing press for this new record. Lana has always been unapologetically sort of making music about a very specific white woman's experience, and everything she talks about in the sort of feminist narrative of vein of her writing is definitely more centered around like white middle class, upper class women. And it's something that I think that she owns and understands. But like I said, she doesn't sometimes in that post, like, she doesn't understand when she's crossing into conversations that make her points very problematic. And I don't know. I just want the music. So that's where I stand with that. I'd be interested to know what you guys think about all of that. And so this video review ended up being a little longer just because I wanted to share some of those thoughts. And I do miss speaking on camera. Um, I got to be real with you. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. And I will see you all in my next video. Hopefully that won't be terribly long from now. Peace, love, and light. Bye.